The heavy oak doors of Westlake County Courthouse swung open as Officer Ray Daniels entered with the swagger of a man who considered the justice system his personal domain. 22 years on the force had hardened him into something both more and less than the fresh-faced rookie he'd once been. His uniform was pressed to military precision, shoes gleaming like black mirrors, badge polished to catch every ray of light. But the eyes that scanned the courthouse lobby held something dangerous. A contempt for change. The courthouse staff had a saying about Daniels. Perfect uniform, poisoned mind. A young black attorney hurried past, accidentally brushing Daniels' shoulder. "Watch it," Daniels snapped. "What's the rush, counselor? Got another dealer to set." "Free?" The attorney stopped. "I'm sorry, Officer Daniels. I didn't see you there." "Never do you?" Daniels said with a smirk. "Too busy climbing that affirmative action ladder to notice the people actually keeping this city safe." Several heads turned. The young attorney's expression hardened, but he chose restraint over confrontation. "I have a case to prepare, officer." "Excuse me." "That's right," Daniels called after him. "Nothing to say because you know I'm right." "Morning." "Daniels," called the security guard manning the metal detector. "Court 4 today, right?" "Yeah," Daniels grunted. "The Washington case. Probably another waste of time." He gestured dismissively. "These Harvard types keep finding new technicalities to let criminals walk." The security guard gave a non-committal nod. Behind his professional facade, he recalled how Daniels had changed after his partner was killed 15 years ago, as though grief had curdled into bitterness, then hardened into prejudice. Officer Daniels entered courtroom 4, nodding to several officers seated in the gallery. The room had an almost reverential quality before proceedings began. Polished wood, the American flag standing tall beside the bench, the subtle scent of lemon polish that never quite masked the underlying tension of lives hanging in the balance. This was his arena. For 22 years he'd been the star witness in countless cases, his testimony sending hundreds of criminals to jail. At least, that's how he saw it. He took his customary seat behind the prosecutor's table. Several attorneys nearby glanced at him, then quickly looked away. Daniels had a reputation that preceded him, respected by some, feared by others, avoided by most. He radiated the confidence of a man who believed his badge placed him above scrutiny. Assistant District Attorney Priya Sharma was reviewing her notes when Daniels sat down. A talented prosecutor in her 3rd year with the DA's office, she had learned to handle difficult officers with diplomatic caution. "Officer Daniels," she acknowledged, her tone professional but guarded. "The Washington case is second on the docket today." "Any chance of a plea deal?" Daniels asked, leaning forward. "This one's open and shut. Kid was practically begging to get caught." Sharma shook her head, subtly shifting her chair to create more distance between them. "Defense is claiming improper search. They've filed a motion to suppress the evidence." Daniels scoffed, louder than necessary. "Of course they—" Same old playbook. Blame the officer, ignore the crime." Several heads turned at his outburst. Sharma's expression tightened with discomfort. She hesitated before speaking again, lowering her voice. "Also, just so you're prepared, we have a new judge today. Judge Peterson retired last month." New judge. "Who'd they bring in?" Daniels asked, suddenly more alert. He had built a comfortable relationship with Judge Peterson over the years. The older judge rarely questioned officer testimony and tended to rule favorably for law enforcement. Judge Victor Lawrence, transferred from the Eastern Circuit, Harvard Law, 10 years as a federal prosecutor before joining the bench. Daniels' face hardened as he processed this information. "Lawrence? Never heard of him." He's only been here a week, Sharma explained, watching Daniels' reaction carefully. But I've heard he runs an extremely organized courtroom, very particular, about procedure and evidence standards. He's already dismissed 2 cases for improper warrant execution. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The Honorable Judge Victor Lawrence presiding. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Lawrence entered, his black robes flowing as he moved to his chair. He was a tall man in his early 50s with close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His dark skin contrasted with the black robe, and his expression was neutral as he surveyed the courtroom. Officer Daniels stared at the new judge, his jaw tightening. He leaned toward another officer beside him. Diversity hire, he muttered under his breath. Wonder who he knows in the governor's office. Be seated, Judge Lawrence instructed, his voice deep and measured. Good morning, everyone. For those I haven't yet met, I am Judge Victor Lawrence. In my courtroom, I expect 3 things: thorough preparation, strict punctuality, and unwavering adherence to proper procedure. His gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily on Officer Daniels, who stared back with barely concealed hostility. When the Washington case was called, ADA Sharma rose. The state is ready to proceed on the motion to suppress, Your Honor. Defense Attorney Thomas Bell also stood. Defense is ready, Your Honor. Judge Lawrence nodded. As I understand it, the defense is challenging the legality of the search that produced the evidence in question. Yes, Your Honor. We contend that Officer Daniels conducted an illegal search without probable cause. I'll need to hear testimony from the arresting officer, Judge Lawrence said. Officer Daniels, please approach the stand. Daniels walked to the witness stand with the confident stride of someone who had testified hundreds of times. After being sworn in, he settled into the chair. Officer Daniels, Ada Sharma began, could you please describe the circumstances that led to your interaction with Mr. Washington on the evening of March 15th? I was on patrol in Oak Hill around 10:30 p.m. I observed the defendant walking down Maple Street, looking into parked cars. Given the recent spike in car break-ins, I decided to conduct a field interview. What happened when you approached Mr. Washington? He immediately became nervous, wouldn't make eye contact, kept putting his hands in his pockets despite my instructions not to. Based on my 22 years of experience, this behavior indicated he was hiding something. What actions did you take at that point? I conducted a pat-down for my safety. During the pat-down, I felt what I recognized as a bag of pills in his jacket pocket. I removed it and found prescription medication not in his name. Thank you, officer. No further questions at this time. Judge Lawrence turned to the defense. Attorney. Mr. Bell, your cross-examination. Bell approached the podium. Officer Daniels, you testified that you observed my client looking into parked cars. Could you be more specific about what you actually saw? He was walking slowly, peering into car windows as he passed. Was he trying door handles? Using any tools? Standing at any particular vehicle for an extended period? No, but... So he was walking down a public street, glancing at cars as he passed. Is that a fair characterization? Daniels frowned. You're oversimplifying it. His behavior was suspicious in context. The context being that he's a young black man in Oak Hill after dark? Bell asked pointedly. Objection! Sharma called out. Sustained, Judge Lawrence said. Mr. Bell, please restrict your questions to the facts of the case. Bell nodded. Officer Daniels, did you activate your body camera during this encounter? Flicker of annoyance crossed Daniels's face. No, I did not. Why not? I was approaching what appeared to be a suspicious person. I didn't want the camera light to alert him. Isn't department policy to activate cameras before all civilian encounters? That's a guideline, not a strict requirement, Daniels replied, his tone growing defensive. When you say Mr. Washington became nervous, what specific behaviors did you observe? Like I said, he avoided eye contact, kept putting his hands in his pockets. Did he attempt to flee? No. Did he make any threatening movements toward you? Not exactly, but did he refuse to identify himself when asked? No, he provided ID, Bell nodded. So to be clear, a young man who was walking down a public street, who did not flee, who provided identification when asked, who made no threatening movements, this person was subjected to a physical search because he seemed nervous during an unexpected police stop after dark. Daniels's face hardened. When you've been on the job as long as I have, you develop instincts about these things. Judge Lawrence leaned forward. Officer Daniels, the court, needs specific, articulable facts that led to the search, not general references to instinct or experience. Daniels looked directly at the judge, his expression barely concealing his contempt. With all due respect, Your Honor, sometimes police work isn't neat and tidy like they teach in law school. In the real world, we make judgment calls to keep communities safe. A hushed silence fell over the courtroom. Officer Daniels, Judge Lawrence said evenly, this court requires evidence that your actions were in accordance with the Fourth Amendment. Please answer the question that was asked. Daniels clenched his jaw. He matched the description of suspects from previous car break-ins. Bell quickly interjected. What description would that be, officer? Because no such description appears in your report. General description, Daniels said vaguely. Young black male, average height, dark clothing. So a description that could match thousands of people in this city, Bell noted. No further questions, Your Honor. During redirect examination, ADA Sharma tried to salvage the testimony, but Daniels had grown increasingly terse. When Bell began his final cross-examination, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Officer Daniels, how many complaints have been filed against you during your 22 years on the force? Objection, Sharma called. Relevance. Goes to credibility, Your Honor, Bell responded. Judge Lawrence considered briefly. I'll allow it. Please answer the question, officer. Daniels glared at the judge. I don't know the exact number. Is it more than 10? Possibly. More than 20? Daniels' face flushed. I work in high-crime areas. Complaints come with the territory. How many complaints specifically alleged racial bias or profiling? Objection. Sharma stood. Before Judge Lawrence could rule, Daniels snorted derisively. This is ridiculous. 22 years serving this community and I'm being treated like a criminal because I did my job. Judge Lawrence's voice cut through the tension. Officer Daniels, you will restrict yourself to answering the questions put to you. Of course, Daniels replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Whatever your honor says. He muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like affirmative action bench. The courtroom went silent. Judge Lawrence set down his pen deliberately. Officer Daniels approached the bench. Counsel, join us. As they gathered before the bench, Judge Lawrence spoke in a low voice. Officer Daniels, did you just make a comment about affirmative action? Daniels hesitated, then lifted his chin defiantly. I was merely commenting on the changing standards in our justice system, Your Honor. This court will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, Officer Daniels, I expect a different attitude. In his chambers, Judge Lawrence stood by the window, staring out at the city below. His composed exterior had momentarily cracked. He removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose as he exhaled slowly. On his desk sat a framed photo of his father, the first black police officer in their small southern town, standing proudly in his uniform. As a child, Lawrence had witnessed the daily indignities his father endured from fellow officers, the dismissal of his authority, the constant need to be twice as good, twice as disciplined. "Giving me trouble, Your Honor?" His clerk, Janet, stood in the doorway with a sympathetic smile. "Officer Daniels has quite a reputation around here," Lawrence replied, replacing his glasses. "That's putting it mildly," Janet said. "Judge Peterson used to let him run the courtroom. Some attorneys call certain officers Peterson's pets. Daniels was at the top of that list." Lawrence nodded thoughtfully. "In 20 years of law, I've encountered countless Officer Daniels, men who see my skin before they see my robes." He traced his finger along the spines of law books on his shelf. "Usually, I let their attitudes slide off me like water. But today—" "He got under your skin," Janet finished. "Yes," Lawrence admitted, "and I can't allow that. This isn't about him disrespecting me. It's about him disrespecting the law." He straightened his robes with practiced precision. "The Constitution doesn't bend for anyone's prejudice, Janet, not in my courtroom." When court resumed, Judge Lawrence returned to the bench, his demeanor composed. "Having heard the testimony and arguments, I'm prepared to rule," he announced. "I find that Officer Daniels lacked specific, articulable facts to justify the search of Mr. Washington. The search was based on vague impressions and generalized suspicions that fall well short of the reasonable suspicion standard established in Terry v. Ohio." Daniels stiffened in his seat, his face darkening. Furthermore, the failure to activate body camera footage raises serious concerns about the transparency of this encounter. The motion to suppress is granted. All evidence obtained from the search is inadmissible. Additionally, Judge Lawrence added, his voice taking on a more severe tone, this court cannot overlook Officer Daniels' conduct during these proceedings. The disrespect shown to this court is unacceptable from any officer of the law. "Officer Daniels," Judge Lawrence said sharply, "stand up." Daniels hesitated, then slowly rose to his feet. "This court finds you in contempt. You are fined $1,000, and I am issuing a formal judicial complaint to your department. Furthermore, you are barred from testifying in my courtroom until you complete a court-approved training program on proper courtroom conduct and implicit bias." A shocked murmur ran through the courtroom. "Your Honor," Daniels managed. "You can't—" "I can and I have," Judge Lawrence interrupted firmly. "This court has a duty to ensure that justice is administered fairly. Your conduct suggests a disregard for both the dignity of these proceedings and the constitutional rights of the citizens you are sworn to protect." Judge Lawrence leaned forward. "In my courtroom, everyone is held to the same standard, regardless of their position, their years of service, or their personal opinions about who sits on this bench. The law applies equally to all. That's not affirmative action. That's the Constitution." The courtroom remained silent as Judge Lawrence's words hung in the air. "Court is adjourned," he announced, striking his gavel once. In the corridor outside, Police Captain Rivera was waiting. Her expression was grim as she approached Daniels. "My office." "Now," she said quietly. The following morning, Daniels sat across from Captain Rivera, his usual confidence notably absent. On her desk lay a copy of Judge Lawrence's formal complaint, alongside Daniels' personnel file. 22 years, Ray," Rivera said. 8 commendations for bravery, 3 life-saving awards, and 17 civilian complaints, 5 of which specifically alleged racial bias. Those complaints were all dismissed. They were found not sustained, due to lack of evidence, Rivera corrected. That's not the same as being exonerated. She explained that body camera footage from Daniels' backup officers contradicted key elements of his testimony. Mr. Washington wasn't looking into cars. He was walking home from his shift at the hospital, still wearing his orderly uniform. The PI department is launching a formal investigation. Until it's completed, you're on administrative leave. Daniels' face paled. Admin leave? For what? Because some judge got his feelings hurt? Rivera's expression hardened. No, Ray. Because we uphold the law, all of it, including the parts about equal protection and due process. Judge Lawrence didn't rule against you because of who you are. He ruled against you because your actions violated constitutional principles. 3 months later, Officer Daniels stood outside courtroom 4, hesitating before entering. The past 12 weeks had been the most humbling of his career. The administrative leave had started as an angry vacation, days spent fuming at home, telling himself he was the victim of political correctness gone mad. But something had shifted during the required implicit bias training. At first, he'd sat, with arms crossed, mentally dismissing every scenario presented. But then came the session on selective enforcement. The statistics couldn't be argued away. The patterns couldn't be denied. The trainer, a retired black police chief from Chicago, hadn't preached or condemned. He'd simply presented facts, asked questions, and waited. I'm not here to tell you what to think, the chief had said. I'm here to ask you to examine why you think it. That night, Daniels had pulled out old case files, reviewing his own reports with new eyes. Patterns emerged that he couldn't unsee. Patterns in who he stopped, who he searched, who he gave warnings to versus arrests. The investigation into his cases had confirmed multiple procedural violations, cases where he'd cut corners because he knew the suspect was guilty. Now, dressed in his uniform that no longer felt like comfortable armor, he took a deep breath and entered the courtroom. Several attorneys nodded to him, not with fear or deference, but simple professional courtesy. He returned the gestures, feeling strangely unburdened. After the morning's cases were heard, Judge Lawrence called a brief recess. Daniels was preparing to leave when the court clerk approached him. Officer Daniels, Judge Lawrence would like to see you in his chambers. His stomach tightened, but he nodded and followed her to the judge's office. In the 3 months since the contempt citation, he'd replayed their confrontation countless times in his mind, each time seeing it differently. In the judge's private office, Daniels stood awkwardly, hat in hand, like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Officer Daniels, Judge Lawrence acknowledged, gesturing to a chair. Please sit down. Thank you for seeing me, Your Honor, Daniels said, his tone markedly different. I wanted to apologize personally for my conduct in your courtroom, Judge A. Lawrence studied him thoughtfully. I appreciate that, officer. I understand you've completed the training program. Yes, sir. It was educational. A hint of a smile touched Lawrence's lips. That's often code for uncomfortable but necessary. I understand now that for too long, I've been operating as if the ends justify the means, Daniels admitted. After my partner was killed 15 years ago, I started seeing threats everywhere. That's not an excuse, just context. Judge Lawrence leaned forward. The means matter, officer. They're what separates justice from power. The Constitution isn't an obstacle to effective policing. It's the very foundation that gives your work, legitimacy. As Daniels left the courthouse that afternoon, he passed the young attorney he'd insulted months earlier. Their eyes met briefly, and after a moment's hesitation, Daniels nodded respectfully. The attorney, surprised, returned the gesture. The contempt citation that had seemed like a professional death sentence had instead become a turning point. He had learned that true respect wasn't earned through intimidation or special treatment, but through fair and equal application of the law, and that lesson, difficult as it had been, was perhaps the most important one of his entire career.